Now, businesses that were facing an economic cliff in September are relieved to see JobKeeper extended into next year. However, the scheme will operate at a reduced rate and many won't be eligible for payments going forward. Now, the government is facing a balancing act between weaning those off support schemes in a bid to assist economic recovery while still providing much needed financial support for those hit the hardest during this pandemic. The Australian's editor-at-large, Paul Kelly, joins me now in Sydney for his political analysis. Paul, I'm keen to take a look at the political impact of the JobKeeper and JobSeeker decision. We know following this week's news poll, both the Prime Minister and the Treasurer are doing well. How will this impact them over the next 6 months?
Well, I think you got it in one, Rita, saying it's a balancing act. And the politics of this are incredibly difficult. As Scott Morrison said, this virus plots its own course. And the challenge facing the government is to wind back some of the financial aid because the quantum of the financial aid is simply unsustainable. Yet this will come at a time when the unemployment rate will increase. One of the paradoxes of this situation is that as we go into recovery, unemployment will continue to go up. There are two critical questions here for the government. Its policy, I think, is premised on a fairly optimistic view of the medical outlook. That is, it's really assuming that Victoria doesn't succumb big time to the second wave and that New South Wales is able to hang on. And if those assumptions are undone, then the government is going to be in a very, very difficult situation. The second assumption is that the public will accept the fact that some of the support has got to be phased back. And of course, that's a very difficult assumption for people. They've been getting emergency assistance, and now they've got to confront the idea that that emergency assistance, while it will continue, will be phased down in terms of the quantum. That is a difficult political ask.
Absolutely, and you've got the situation where some people are better off financially in the age of COVID than they were beforehand with JobKeeper. And then if we remove that assistance from them completely in a tough job environment, that's going to be very difficult for those people to find a job and to be able to survive after having the largest of the taxpayer taking care of them for so long.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the sort of irony about the JobKeeper program is that it's being criticised from two sides. It's certainly true to say, on the one hand, that a number of people are better off. They're actually getting, in terms of the amount of fortnightly payment from JobKeeper, a higher wage than what they were getting before. On the other hand, you've got people saying, oh, well, JobKeeper's not sufficient, it should be more broadly based. So I guess the point to make here is that the government had to take a quick decision at the time, and it was guided by administrative factors and the need to have one across the board policy, and that clearly led to a number of anomalies in one sense or another.
Now to a different topic. An Australian defence contractor has been targeted by hackers working for Chinese spy agencies. The claims were revealed by the US Department of Justice, who've also identified the hackers for targeting American firms seeking a vaccine for the coronavirus. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, I think no one will be surprised by this. I think the really interesting thing is that the United States Department of Justice is on the case, and it clearly intends to take action of some sort. And so essentially this hacking has been against American institutions, but there are contractors involving Australia. In that sense, Australia is also involved. I think the really interesting thing here is what will be the actual effect of any legal proceedings taken by the United States. I guess there's a really question mark about how effective that will be. But the broader point to make is that this is perfectly consistent with all the warnings being given by the Australian government and Scott Morrison in recent weeks and months. That is that Australia, the Australian government, Australian institutions, universities, businesses, governments, all sorts of consultancies are under cyber attack and hacking attack from Chinese sources. So in that sense, it'll be no surprise. I think the interesting thing is what will be the effect of any legal action.
And it was only a few days ago that Russia was accused of trying to hack companies that are developing a vaccine, and now we've got China. Paul, do you think this is a great example of why we do need to beef up cyber security in this country?
Well, all these are examples of what we call the new grey zone of political warfare. And this is driven by technology. And essentially what we're seeing here is some sort of revolutionary change in the nature of power rivalry and the way conflict is being pursued. And it's no longer just a question of military and economic competition. It now goes into this grey zone driven by technology, driven by cyber interference and hacking. And it's essentially designed to try and penetrate the other nation's most prized secrets, steal the secrets, diffuse their systems, and compromise their political systems. And essentially, I think the point to make about Australia is that we have been alert to this over the last few years in terms of the legislation passed by the Turnbull government and now the sort of warnings being given by the Morrison government. But this is the new nature of political warfare between countries.
Oh, absolutely. And we may be aware of it, but I wonder if we've been as hardline in protecting our intellectual data as we should have been. Now, moving on, Senator Rex Patrick says federal politicians should be docked $1,000 for every cancelled sitting day in Canberra after Parliament was deferred till August. But the Prime Minister disagrees.
Well, if he's not working while the Parliament's not sitting, that's a matter for him. I can tell you my government members are working as hard outside of the Parliament as they do, and I can certainly assure you that I am. I think that sort of stuff is just a political clickbait for people looking to put their head above the parapet. I mean, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't get us anywhere.
What do you think, Paul? Do you agree with the Prime Minister there, or should politicians be taking a pay cut like many other people are in the community?
Well, I wonder who's going to impose the pay cut and who's going to collect the money. Look, if we're serious about this, I think these comments are unfair, unworkable and unnecessary. I mean, clearly the Parliament is going to come back at some time. It's got to come back at some time to pass the government's legislation. The recent action the Prime Minister took was based on health advice. And as for fining all MPs, well, most MPs had nothing to do with the decision anyway.
They haven't, but we've seen New Zealand politicians take a pay cut. Many people in private industry have taken 20, 30, 40% pay cuts. Would it be a sign that we're all in this together if our politicians did submit to even, say, a 10% pay cut?
Oh, I think that's a different issue, whether politicians should take a pay cut in terms of the virus. Well, I think what's important here is that we don't see pay increases. So what we're seeing at the moment is the imposition of a freeze on a lot of political and public sector salaries. I think that's important. I think it's wrong if we see pay increases going on in the public sector, and we're seeing that in some states.
Yes.
I think we ought to be a little bit careful about the impact of actual pay cuts. I mean, clearly there would be strong support for that as far as the community goes. But the point to make about this is that I think at this stage, the main responsibility on the politicians is to try to manage these two tasks, the medical challenge and the economic challenge.
Absolutely. It is a careful balancing act. Thank you so much for your time, Paul.
Thanks, Rita.